Good morning, everybody. I'm Sudha. I'd rather be called Sudha than the doctor title is makes me a bit nervous. About a week into teaching, so I was doing both computer science and information technology at the Universal American School, and about a week into teaching, I had to do the topic on radio frequency identification with my students, middle school and high schoolers. Yeah. Any question? Everybody's ready for a bit of learning and new challenges today. All right, so what's our objective for today? Because we are all, and I'm not a very big fan of standing in the front, so I might, you might hear my voice, but you know where to reach me. What is our objective today? I would like to follow the model of know, understand, and do. What do we as instructional coaches, curriculum designers, and classroom teachers need to know in terms of what is required to incorporate the standards? What are the key elements? So a little bit of this morning session before coffee, we're going to wear a curriculum designer hat, okay? Because I believe strongly that to be able to unpack it at the classroom level, we need to understand the curriculum design principles involved in making that shift. And I know a lot of you are already curriculum specialists and coordinators, so hopefully that will help you. And being able to do what can not just my teachers, but our students do in order to engage in that shift. Okay, so we're going to be little kids actually exploring some of the hands-on practices. So what's our roadmap? We're specifically going to look at how the NGSS standards are different from traditional textbook-based, teacher-driven curriculum, like what I was 10 years ago, right? PowerPoint, 45 slides, page number 50, to becoming more conceptually engaging, right? So how can we move from a traditional two-dimensional curriculum to a concept-based three-dimensional model? And what specific shifts does it require? We're going to specifically look as curriculum designers, how is knowledge structured? What is the structure of knowledge? What is the cognitive process of learning when we actually make those conceptual engagements? Okay, we're going to take a look at that. And moving from fact-based to concept-based, not saying one is more important than the other, but how do we bring about a synergy, right? That's the key word there. It's not one over the other, it's not one before or after the other, but the synergy between the factual and the conceptual. And how can we make our students move from lower order thinking to higher order thinking? So that kind of summarizes my ambitious roadmap for this day. And oftentimes Dr. Erickson tells me, Sudha, you're working with highly experienced educators all the time. Remember, when they walk into the training, they're like, oh my God, there's so much I do already. What am I going to do this full day? What am I going to learn new? And she says, by the time you finish the roadmap, they're like, oh my goodness, all of this with all of what I already do. But I promise, by the time you leave at 3:30, if not exactly like this, you'll look somewhere near closer to this. And we'll have an assessment of my son. Yeah, we'll see, do we look anywhere closer to this or not? Right, so absolutely. So great thinking there, and we'll come back to this hopefully to kind of reflect on it once more. So the whole notion here is that movement, that transition from two-dimensional to three-dimensional teaching. So what exactly is two-dimensional and three-dimensional? A two-dimensional teacher focuses on the topics, the facts, and the skills, right? By the end of grade 3, everybody needs to know plant kingdom, animal kingdom, a few words on that, and they need to be able to draw a picture of the plant. That's it.
Skills.
A three-dimensional teacher uses the facts and the skills to talk about bigger concepts. So for example, she might teach plants and animal life, but under the bigger umbrella concept of ecosystems, right? She might teach at grade 6 about environmental, about the pollution in Dubai, but a three-dimensional teacher will use the pollution in Dubai as an activity to talk about environmental sustainability at a global level. Make sense? So can you just quickly share amongst yourself some specific examples in your classroom where it was at the fact level and you took it to the third dimensional level. A very quick discussion. No? We want to move on? Okay, keep thinking. When the penny drops, just let me know. So what is the whole idea of moving from a 2D to a 3D model? We want to move away from the inch deep to a mile wide, a little bit of everything, right? Rather than that, we want to choose certain specific concepts or areas of knowledge and go deeper into it, right? So force, for example. If the force is the larger concept, how quickly the unit would finish if I'm just going to put up a few definitions, ask a few questions, and I'm done. Whereas here, you're challenging them. How can you apply the understanding of the concept of force to a practical experiment of sending rockets, and then seeing the comparison between how does force work in different planetary systems, right? So that whole connecting the factual and the conceptual. So the idea here is to make sure that students are processing the information not just at the factual domain, but at the conceptual domain as well. And we'll talk about that in the context of structure of knowledge. And why are we doing this? Why are we making sure that we don't just teach the facts, discrete facts and topics, and leave our students today? The objective behind that is for us as teachers to remember we are teaching students whose careers we still do not know how it will look like, right? Research proves that the factual information we learn at the university first year is actually outdated by the time you graduate, right? I can see you smiling, and particularly as science and math and every subject area, right? It's moving so quickly. So all that we can do is give our students the skills and the strategies to become lifelong learners. How will you apply your understanding of force, which we learned in the particular context of rockets today in the classroom, 20 years from today? We want them to transfer that information. We want them to apply the information, not just within the school, but in real life. And we want it to make meaning in their lives 20 years from today. How many times have our students turned around and asked, Ms. Sandra, why am I studying this?
Yes.
Right? So unless as teachers we have asked ourselves, why am I spending Thursday afternoon every week for the next 2 months talking about force? You know, I was in this class with a math teacher, grade 3, and she was talking about probability and statistics. And the student said, Miss, why are we even studying this today? And she goes, well, if you grow up, you might win a lottery and you might have to, you know what I'm saying? And it's not the fault of the teacher. It's possibly because we haven't been given the opportunity and the requirement to kind of reflect and say, why am I doing this? How does this make sense in my real life today and tomorrow, right? So that's the big idea here. So how do we achieve this in the classroom? Now we're going to wear the curriculum designer hat, okay? So what exactly is the structure of knowledge? I'm not going to talk about this. I'm going to leave the slide for a couple of minutes. You're all professionals, educators. You can make meaning and tell me what it looks like. Remember, it's like a middle school, high school example. Doesn't matter. Take a minute to reflect and let me know when you're ready to speak about it. You can explain this in the context of what you're doing in your classes today or next week, or what your teachers are working on within science, for example. You can apply it across the range. Start from kindergarten. So as teachers, when we teach a particular topic, the same way you guys fantastically explained it. What are the facts I want to teach? What is the bigger topic? But if you're a two-dimensional teacher, you will stop there. But if you have to put the NGSS into practice, you have to move to the conceptual level. You have to say, what are the bigger concepts here? And then what is the generalization? Oftentimes, your principle or your theory is often a broader standard within the NGSS. And we're going to look at that. We're going to look at exactly the scaffold. All right? So we're asking all the great questions. So here is the specific example, the description of that. Yes, facts are kind of locked. So if I talk about plants, I'm only talking about plants or human body or organisms. Topics are locked, so it's like plant life, animal life, ions, metals, things like that. The concepts would be the larger abstractions, so ionization, connections, systems, patterns. These are the bigger concepts. And of course, the generalization, which is the broader idea. So what is the big idea that I want them to take away from my lesson, right? That's basically idea-centered teaching. So we talked about this. So the whole notion here is to bring that synergy between factual and conceptual level, okay? Why? Because it makes connections to prior knowledge, the very important point that came about. We wanted students to make patterns and connections between and across disciplines. So any questions before we move on to understanding concepts? Any questions, any thought? Like I said, a little bit of the first hour is a little theory-oriented because we're getting our curriculum design principles right, and then we're going to move into engineering design practice. Here we go. A concept is an organizing idea, a mental construct that is timeless, universal, applied across disciplines, right? Here is a picture to depict the concept of power. Okay, this is power.
Until I come back.
This is power.
Just, I'll be back in 5
Brain power. Specific to science, but still it is power. And here is power. So the idea for me to show you these slides is to say the transferability, right? So if it's a higher abstraction, you can not only apply it to your science, you can apply it to real life and to social studies and to math and make those connections, right? So there are those bigger umbrella examples that are timeless and abstract, and they are sometimes complex in the sense you have to unpack them, and that whole notion of differentiation. For some students, it is challenging. We have to unpack it, and that's where resources that are scaffolding all the way to help the different levels come into play, and we're going to play with some of those fantastic resources you have in your folders. Two types of concepts, macro and micro. Again, some of these may not make sense to exactly what you're doing, but if you do have a question at break, we can always have a chat about that. So the larger concepts transfer across disciplines. There are the micro concepts. So what did you talk about? There was a specific example in chemistry that ionization. It's still a concept, but within the science, right? Whereas systems or connections are still science, but you can still apply it to English. Here's another example. A two-dimensional teacher will talk about the Alaska oil spill, let's say, for example, okay? The three-dimensional teacher will talk about environmental sustainability, right? A two-dimensional teacher will talk about numbers on a number line in a math classroom. A two-dimensional teacher will talk about the relationship of different parts of the, just the parts of the body, for example. A three-dimensional teacher will talk about the relationship of the body parts or the senses and make those connections. And you can further move it up. As you said, you can talk about relationship in a science classroom. You can talk about relationship of numbers in a math classroom. I can talk about relationship in an English classroom. I can use the example of Romeo and Juliet to talk about relationship. I can take it all the way up to the diploma students and talk about relationship of supply and demand in an economics classroom. Can you see the power of that? You get it. Now you get it. I love that, when I can see it in the eyes. Absolutely. So those broader ideas, the bigger abstractions, the more abstract it is, it's transferable across disciplines. The micro concepts give you the depth. Do you want to pause to kind of process that info? Because it's very critical we get these design principles right, because after break, we're going to make the connections between Common Core and NGSS. And unless we engage in that thinking, but does that make sense? Any challenge in that process? For me, this example kind of clarified my thinking very well. That's why I share it often, all the way up and with differentiation. And going back to your point of differentiation, here's another specific example. So if I'm looking at the text of Romeo and Juliet through relationship, there is a specific aspect that I'll look in the text. What is the relationship between the two families, between Romeo and Juliet, and so on. If I'm looking at that same text through the concept of conflict, I'm still reading the same text, but I'm looking at it with a certain perspective. Make sense? So I can teach a topic with very many concepts. Where do these concepts come from? To a large extent from the standards. And different concepts enable you to approach the same piece of information through different lenses, different perspectives, but that's where you kind of help to differentiate. So for example, if I'm going to do Romeo and Juliet as an example, I would give my highly able, ready-to-go student conflict resolution as a concept. My lower level kids who are still struggling to read, but I want them to first at least read Romeo and Juliet and say, hey guys, let's talk about love as a concept. And everybody will open the book, right? Because they want to know more about love when they're 13, 14 or whatever. Do you see what I mean? So using the concepts depending on our students. I would use from my toolkit because I know my students well. I know their level. I can differentiate not just on ability, but also on their learning styles, on the process and the outcome as well. As a very quick example, but when we do the activity, we'll come back to it. Any thoughts from that table? Quieter ones often make me very nervous because they are the thinkers. You know, they're gonna think, and then after 2 days, I'll have Miss Dr. Sunder knock off the doctor and say, Sudha, I have a question. When you said this, and that it happens, right? We all process information in a very different. I can see that smile. I'm gonna get you, Sudha. Go for it. Yeah. All right. So now we're going NGSS specific. Okay. So we looked at all the curriculum design principles, and we're gonna look at the NGSS standards. So this is not new to you. You've all kind of dipped into this. The 3 dimensions, the engineering practices, the disciplinary core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts. So a larger part of the first hour, I focused on the cross-cutting concepts because as science teachers, you're already experts in the design and the core ideas. It's only the conceptual engagement piece that's kind of a challenge, right? I was in this workshop by one of the great minds who was a part of writing the NGSS, and he said, Sudha, the cross-cutting concept is like the ugly stepsister. You know, like everybody kind of, what is this now? We know the core ideas and, you know. So that's something that often needs clarification. But being a concept-based, passionate enthusiast, I feel that's beautiful, Cinderella. That's what brings the meaning to all of what we do. That's just my idea. So what are the concepts chosen by NGSS? We talked about concepts, the micro concept. This is all in the NGSS standards and practices, yeah? What are the concepts, science concepts? Patterns. Science is all about cause and effect, right? Scale, proportion quantity, systems, energy and matter, structure and function, stability and change. So NGSS has picked out these specific 8 concepts, scientific concepts. Here is the scaffolding from the NGSS. So the concept of energy and matter, how is it scaffolded all the way from grade 2 until 9 to 12? Okay, I'm not going to read this out. This is from the NGSS standards, but you can make sense of this. Any questions on that? Any thoughts on that? I'm sure you've seen this before, but are there any questions? No, we're good? Here we go. So why did they choose these concepts? For what purpose? How has these been chosen? They're chosen because they provide students the opportunity to make those connections, exactly what we said here. We want them to make those connections and enrich their application of the core ideas and the scientific practices. So for example, going back to the fantastic example of applying force to energy, you are using the concepts of force and applying that in the activity to enrich their understanding of engineering design and practices. Can you see that? So that's the idea. How do we bring it all together, right? And the rationale, again, provided by the National Research Council. So the National Research Council, the NGSS came from the research study performed by the National Research Council. So if you haven't looked up on their website, it's a great idea, especially if you're a curriculum specialist. Look into the National Research Council website. It will give you some critical insights into what's happening in the NGSS. Yes? And what is our objective as teachers? The NGSS requires that we make explicit reference to these standards as we are teaching. Do not assume. As teachers, we do a lot of assumicide, right? I've talked about forces. They're going to understand how the rocket works. No, you cannot leave it to chance. You have to deliberately bring it into your lesson planning to make sure you are helping the students scaffold their understanding from the factual to the conceptual. It is a deliberate process. We don't leave thinking to chance. You have to make sure you can make their thinking visible. And through the activity we're going to do, I keep talking about this activity, we're going to be there in 2 minutes. We're going to see how can we make our thinking visible. Okay? We're going to look at that very quickly. Here we go. So here is the challenge. Okay? We're going to do a little bit of an activity, a scientific activity that brings out this very powerful notion of how we can challenge our students and bring about that synergy. So before that, I have a question. How many of you, when you were students, have made paper planes in your classroom? Come on, where did you come from? You haven't made paper planes? Okay. It's a naughty question, and you have to be honest. I was very honest this morning about my failures and my naughty things as a teacher, but you have to be honest as a student. Now here's the question. How many of you have actually made a paper plane and flown it when the teacher was turning her back at the blackboard? Okay, I like the people. Okay, I want those people here. I want those people here. Those who have thrown it at the back of the teacher, come on here, join me, because I'm one of them. And one actually landed on my teacher's bum. So, and I thought, come on, yeah, be a risk. I saw those hands. Come. I saw your hands. Come. Let's go. Okay, I'm going to turn off the mic. We're going to have a little discussion. Here's your activity. Let me just turn it on for them very quickly. So, at every table, you have colored paper. So it's team orange, team blue, team yellow, team green, and team pink perhaps. Every member has to make a paper plane. And if you're a lovely student who's never made a paper plane, that's so hard for me to believe, but you always have studious students. Inside your folder, you have a handout, step-by-step instruction on how to make an airplane. Okay, and the discussion directors, you are the discussion directors, you're going to go around this table and just take notes of their questions. What are they asking? And if they need your expertise on how to fly it on the teacher's bum, you can answer, but through a question. You will not give them, like you cannot say, oh, you have to fold it. You would say, if it has to be that way, how would you fold it? Clear? So you will help them through your questions, number one. Number two, you will take down, I'm going to give you a little thing where you take down all the questions that they're asking when they're in the process. They've already started. Clear? Everybody's good? Okay. Okay, you guys can do it. Go ahead, take your little, this one, and start writing. That's the handout. Thank you, Suzanne.
So this is the handout, guys.
What should I do?
All right, who's coming? Come along, bring your airplane. Okay, who's coming from Team Pink? Here we go. Who's Team Yellow?
I'm Team Yellow.
There we go, Laura, come along. Who's Team Green, the chemist? Come on, guys. Be a risk taker. Okay, come along. Who's next? Suzanne's not allowed, so somebody else has to come. Okay, you're the innovative one. Come on. Team Red, who's coming? Come along. Okay, perfect. Okay, so what we're going to see is how far your airplanes are going to fly. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and go. Oh my goodness!
It's my team, the green one.
Is it? But, well done, guys. Thank you. Thank you. But did so here we go. So what we actually engaged in just before break and right now through the video is the engineering design process. So we talked about the conceptual dimension of the NGSS in the first segment of our workshop. Now we moved into the engineering design process, and you went through the engineering design process when you crafted those paper planes that's lying around your tables, right? You actually went through those design process. We saw how it is applied in the classroom, grade 1 through grade 4, and then the whole notion that science is not a body of language, of knowledge that has to be moved from point X to point Y, but rather it is an iterative process of investigation, improvement, asking, and getting further with that, right? Explaining how the world works. So here are the questions. We don't need to go through it, but you've been through this in the activity and making those connections. So within the very short time, we made some connections, some powerful connections, right, with the factual, the conceptual, and the synergy through the whole engineering design process. And this is the video that we watched. We were supposed to do this before coffee break.
You can take another one if you want.
But absolutely, I'm going to mute that slide. Here we go. So what we're going to do in this part of the workshop, we're going to see how we can bring together, because oftentimes teachers feel the Common Core standards are separate and the NGSS is separate. The science and the math do have very different requirements. But what we're going to see is how they actually go together, how critical reading, writing, and listening skills are essential in order to powerfully unpack and engage in the NGSS. Okay, so we're going to now change our hats. We're going to look through some linguistic perspectives. Are we ready? Any questions before we go?
Nico, here comes the problem, the issue for us.
Great.
Kids, they don't have the language.
Okay, so I'm going to hand out a bit of a reading. You can find your space to read, quiet reading. Okay, so I want few tables to be yellow, few tables to be green. So hopefully we can mix up the yellow and the green. I'll give you a few of the green. Here we go. Thank you. One table full yellow, one table green, however. Okay. Here we go.
We're sticking to our
Oh, okay, your team yellow. I'll give the green to team green. How many do we have here? 1, okay, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry. Yeah, it's correct, I guess. Did everybody get the yellow? Okay, yellow. Any more yellows? No, it's fine. They can still be the green. It doesn't matter. This is the mixed table. They're the special table anyways. Here we go, ladies. I want you to identify some significant moments in the text that really you felt significant in the sense that actually changed the course of the way the story went. Okay, what was really and it's a very personal choice. Remember, there are no right or wrong answers here. But what was significant to you? What touched the chord when you actually read that part? Let's take 2 minutes to go through, and we're going to get responses from you. Okay? I hope we have the microphone ready. Okay, perfect. Whoops. Not only strong, but she was also kind. Is there an explicit reference to kindness in the text? No, but we can understand that she was a strong lady, but she was also kind. What other thoughts? Absolutely, that's powerful. What other concepts are we seeing? Yes.
She wasn't judgmental in the sense that she had said to him she had also done things in her life that she wasn't part of.
Okay.
And he didn't need to say, and then she understood that as a young child, very often you want things and it's not very to get them, so you do make wrong decisions.
Okay.
And she made him see that it's...
Okay, so she related the decision-making process to her prior experience, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes, so she kind of made connection to the fact that as children we all make mistakes and it's okay, and she was trying to give him a second chance. Wonderful. What else are we seeing? Yes, go.
She was tolerant in the sense that she did not ask him where he lived or about his family.
Okay, so you can see tolerance. Tolerance. Okay, you can absolutely, because she did not go into specific details before understanding that, yes, I really want to help this boy. Where he comes from doesn't matter. I don't have to have a big interview here to make sure that I can help him, right? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I believe that she was really commitment and responsible as an adult.
Ah, love it. Responsibility. Okay. Can you show me a specific part of the text? Can you give me an evidence from your text where you feel she was
Actually,
responsible?
I believe it's in page 3 when she grabbed him and she don't want to let him go until she gets sure that he understands or be taught a lesson.
I love the way you look at it. We could, rather than seeing it with anger or vengeance,
And just
you
leave it go.
absolutely.
Responsible and commitment that she had to
Commitment.
Grab him very
Uh-huh.
strongly.
Am I spelling it correctly? Okay, it's hard to commitment, but we get it. Okay, there we go. Here's where the yellow and green comes together. So everybody who's got a green, you're gonna say, yes, Ms. Jones changed Roger. And you're gonna give me evidence from text to say, this is how I think he actually changed him, yeah? And yellow, the team yellow, right from the little rockets and the airplanes, everybody who's got a yellow, who's gonna say, no, I don't think she changed him forever. I can't see any evidence for that. So clear? So green, team green will say, yes, Ms. Jones changed Roger. And team yellow will say, no, Ms. Jones did not change Roger. Okay, so what we did through the process, we looked at a piece of text. You just did a summary. We all do summaries. Every text, summarize it, write a little paragraph, right? The second level of questioning, when I said evidence for text to say, ta-da-da-da-da, whatever, I was looking at the factual part of the structure of knowledge. I said, go back, give me evidence. And then the open-ended question, where there was no right or a wrong answer, I was saying, give me evidence, but there is no right or a wrong answer. Okay? We're moving towards here the 4 instructional strands that Dr. Lanning talks about in terms of aligning to the Common Core standard. So here's a little bit of background. Dr. Lynn Erickson is subject specialist. She's a mathematician, so she talks about the structure of knowledge. But the idea that I'm trying to bring together here is that not all disciplines have a body of knowledge like science or math, languages, for example. It's a process. There are certain processes, strategies, and skills that you go through in order for language acquisition. So the point here is, in language-based disciplines, you can pull the concepts not just from the content itself, but also through the process. And reading, writing, listening, critiquing needs to be taught in context versus in the English or language classroom. So you said it very beautifully. It's a science passage, it's non-negotiable, it's factual. However, unless I give them close reading strategies, unless I give them strategies to be motivated to read it again, they're not going to be answering those questions, right? So actually not just saying every teacher is a reading or writing teacher, but actually through practice, embedding that powerful, absolutely, absolutely. So here we go. Here are the 4 strands for instructional integration. Here's what you did, responding to text, which is the reader's craft, connection of the text to the self, visualization. You're like, this is United States, she's an Afro-American woman. You're slowly starting to paint the picture there. You made some predictions possibly, that yes, he changed, yes, he did not change. But what actually led us to do all of this is the way I questioned. My question directed you to be more appreciative of the reader's craft. Writer's craft. When you said she was Afro-American, what made you think she was Afro-American? Well, the choice of words. She was large and she was, so absolutely. In one of the workshops I did, one teacher said, she's very kind, and Afro-American women are so kind. I'm like, okay, highly debatable, but that's your perspective, right? Absolutely. The structure, the sentence structure, as well as the syntax, the dialogue. So, and the whole notion, what is the big idea? What is the big idea that I take away from this text? Making a permanent change is not easy. That's my big idea. Like, I know there are pieces where you feel, oh, she changed him and he didn't run. However, I still feel to make a real impact in somebody's life is not that easy. That is possibly because of my own life experiences, my own understanding of how the world works. But the bottom line is, I'm giving you the opportunity to establish your big ideas based on your perspectives, based on your experiences. Because remember, every child in the classroom comes in with all of this, right? And that essentially serves as a hook to get into close reading and all of those reading strategies that we do as literacy teachers. So, taking a minute to reflect on the type of questions that I did. When we do inquiry-based teaching, we all talk about inquiry-based teaching. Remember, there can be 3 levels of questioning. The factual question, which have a specific right or a wrong answer. So going back to your question, do we ask children questions that don't have? So we still ask questions that have a specific right or a wrong answer. But then, the most interesting part of learning is the provocative, debatable questions, which do not have a right or a wrong answer, but enables you to think, provokes you to think, to debate, to bring in the multiple perspectives of life. That's how you make it more real life connected. Make sense? And the conceptual question would be more for my really able, or possibly in a class of 20, you have a few kids who are already native speakers, they have more access to language, they can understand. That could be your big idea flipped into a question. So you would say, hey Johnny, your big question, or Johnny's group, your question is, how can we show that kindness can actually change the world? Absolutely. And you would use evidence from the text, you can bring in your own research, you can use new words. So that group is set on a higher level challenge. Though I would say that with a little bit of caution. We do not want to make sure, here is the factual table, you don't get to conceptual because that's where your brain is. We shouldn't definitely be doing that. We should give them the opportunity, like somebody said, team them up with mixed ability so that they have the option to engage in all parts of that discussion. But let's take a minute to, because for me this was very powerful as a classroom teacher, because when I began inquiry-based teaching, I would just go brainstorm some 55 questions and salt and pepper my lessons. You know, here a question, there a question, made no logical coherence, and then just do what I had to do anyways. Do you see what I'm saying? But when I got the structure to inquiry, there is some sort of a logical coherence where you're guiding your students' thinking. So somebody said, how can we make sure that they're not thinking all over the place? Here is a great strategy. Make sure you've kind of gone through what you're doing through that structure of knowledge. Make sure not just your learning engagement, but also your assessments have enough balance between factual, debatable, and conceptual. Make sense? Let's take a minute to reflect in our tables. How does this look? So what we did now was a fiction text, and it's very easy to come up with, you know. Anyway, so here we go. So here is a quick comparison of the structure of knowledge and structure of process. The idea is in content-based subjects, your concepts come from the factual part, but in language arts, it's not just language. Oftentimes physical education, music, dance, performing arts, any of those as well. So the concepts come from both the processes, the strategies, the skills, and the content of the subject discipline. Okay? Here we go. Here is an example. And the 4 strands, we talked about this already. And we talked about the guiding questions. The guiding questions were the 3 levels of questioning: factual, debatable, provocative, and conceptual questions. Great. Any thoughts before we go for lunch?
Each one will have an object, so it's only one. Only one.
Table pink is ready. Yellow,
We're always ready.
green, of course. That's the ready to go team. Blue and red. Everybody's ready. Here we go. Listen carefully and just do what you have to do. This is the story of the Wright family. Last night, the Wright family went to see a part of a cricket game between India and Australia. They left the house at 6 o'clock, right after the Wright family finished dinner. Mr. Wright drove everyone to the game in the red family van, which is always parked on the left side of the driveway. In the van were Mrs. Wright, Ahmed Wright, Zara Wright, and Alif Wright. As they drove down the street, Mrs. Wright waved to Putri, their neighbor, who lives 2 houses down the left. She was walking in her garden on the right side of her house. As the Wright family approached the Sport City Stadium, Mr. Wright exclaimed, "I can't remember where I left my tickets." Alif Wright said, "Dad, I saw you put them in your right-hand pocket." Mr. Wright checked, but they were not there. Zara said, "No, Dad, that isn't right. You left the tickets with me for safekeeping. I have them right here in my bag." "What a relief," said Mr. Wright as he turned to the left into the arena of the car park. Alif almost left his jumper in the van, but right when Mr. Wright was about to lock the doors, he remembered that he had left it under the seat in the left side of the car. The right family had to wait in a line for a bed. But finally, when they made it to their seats and left the stadium, and as they sat down, Mr. Wright looked to his left at the whole Wright family and smiled. He had made the right decision in getting the tickets to this game. Here's the objective. Talk to people sitting around at your table. How did your focus on just focusing on left, right, take you away from how intently you listened? How intently you listened. And how did focusing on the right and left take your attention from the essential meaning of the text? How many questions could we actually answer?
Zero.
Right? Absolutely. And for those of you, by the way, for those of you who ended up with 4 things in your object, take care. It just means that's your personality type, because oftentimes, I didn't make up this activity. It's basically an activity we do to understand what's the power of active listening, right? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But to talk about my teacher hat, it's interesting how in the school day, through the routine, life is like this left, right. You have the activity coming up, and then there's lunch, and then there's parents meeting, and then a parent is calling, and then between all of that, there's NGSS, and there's Common Core. That's the craziness of life, right? That's reality. But if you did end up with 4 things in your hand, you might want to reflect on your personality to make sure that there's not too much on your plate all the time. So it's time to say, and it's oftentimes our character, our character that comes out in it. We're reluctant to pass it quickly because, oh no, we're left, we want to get it right, just off the path. However, the idea for doing this is to make us realize how important it is for us as teachers to facilitate active listening, right? When we are engaged in too many different things, and when we are asking our students to do too many things, we're actually taking away the essence of that learning. What is the purpose of learning? What is the purpose of having our students in our class this afternoon that's going to make sense later, okay? And the idea to bring in here is when we are too focused on science and engineering design and technology and states of matter and solid, liquid, and gas, we actually take away the beauty of science, which is all about art and exploration and failing and sharing and getting up again and trying. And that's the beauty of bringing in the arts into STEM education, right? Let off the steam and let your creative energies flow, bringing in that element of creativity. Because when we're too focused on science, on engineering design, and you have to get this right before you move to the next step, we're kind of killing that creativity there, okay? Here we go. So we know the basics behind the STEAM education, but bringing in design, technology, art, integrating it with the idea of driving innovation K through 12, okay? If you just look up Rhode Island School of Design, you'll get in more fantastic ideas for integrating art. If you are especially looking for that, you can email one of us and I can send you some good links on that. At your tables, on those red baskets, every team has 30 straws. I've counted them 3 times, unless somebody has chewed up one up. Everybody should have 30 in there. And you have some tape, and you have the scissors, and you have everything that you need to do. Your challenge, of course, we are in the city of the tallest tower in the world, so how can we not build a tower? Your challenge is to build the tallest tower, but remember, with the most aesthetic design. So you're gonna be evaluated on not only the height, but also the design. And I would also say the robustness of it. Like, it's a tower. You can't just stack up one straw over the other and say it's a tower. Ready? Everybody's ready to go? Everybody understands the objective? And you have 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, you can clear up the table and let me know when you're ready to start. Start the timer. If you want to clear up some space. Okay, some teams have already started, so I'm going to set the timer.
You can take a collection of stories.
All right. I can see the amount of excitement that went through the process. Okay, we can see very clearly why one is tallest. And of course, when we look at the aesthetic design. But the whole idea, yes, yours. But the whole idea here, you still are. And they were worried that Amar would take out their intellectual property, so they were trying to say, oh my goodness. But can you just reflect for a minute on the powerful discussions that, like, when I went to, you know why this table is like this? Do you know why they're here? Because they're like, oh my God, the angles have to be congruent. Do you see what I'm saying? So that level of discussion, that's a good point. Oftentimes, there is a very interesting paper, I think Kaplan, I can't remember the, group work doesn't spell collaboration. Just because we put a bunch of people in a group and say work together, it doesn't mean they're collaborating. And not everybody effectively functions in cooperation. It is a skill that needs to be taught. And oftentimes what happens, if Johnny is the shy person, he keeps remaining shy throughout while others' ideas get, active. Absolutely. And then his idea kind of just still always remains, and then he grows up with that. But here's another way then to do it. So rather than putting everybody in the group task, you can say, okay, everybody gets to build your own little brain dump first, and then you discuss, like how they did in that little video. Everybody does, and then you say, okay, whose is the best one that fits this particular idea, and you choose that particular idea. And that level of conversation, the math behind it, the stability, the size of, the base of the tower, and then the height, and talking about the congruency of the angles, and all of those discussions, really helps us to reflect and think how quickly all of this comes to the discussion floor in the classroom with a simple activity that engages. And this cost me nothing, like just a bunch of straws and a few tape, and I've got them hooked up. From here, depending on my grade level, depending on what subject I'm teaching, I can take it all the way up to artistic design of patterns and whatever I'm talking about, structure, form, function, to all the way up to math, congruency, angles. I can talk about, in lower classes, I can talk about color, form. So many, the possibilities are endless. You've got the canvas. You as an artist can now apply your imagination to take your kids to the next level. The purpose for today was to bring together the whole instructional design element within NGSS. We looked at curriculum design principles. We looked at the 3 dimensions of the NGSS with the curriculum design perspective. We looked at the cross-cutting concept, the disciplinary core ideas, and the engineering design practices. We realized it doesn't take much to embed this within our instruction. It is simple things that you already do, but probably what we lack is that critical reflection and the consistency across, all of what we do, and what resources can we actually have to help us do that consistently across all grade levels. So here we go. Here is what the celebrated physicist talking about how scientific creativity is normally in a straitjacket, kind of, loosen it up a little bit, enable students to innovate, create, test, fail, retest, and all of those things. I'm looking for my clicker. If I don't find it, I can just keep pushing the mouse. But if you see that black little clicker, oh, here it is. So, probably this is how your brain looks right now. Conceptual understanding, critical thinking, differentiation, education, technology, all of those stuff. This is how a teacher's brain looks possibly every single day, right? What help can we provide? What support can we bring? Like I said, it's always important that teachers understand curriculum design principles, but at the end of the day, we would love to get some support and help towards curriculum development and design. Here's where some of the resources, so the next 15-20 minutes, I'm just going to quickly walk through what you can find within smart resources, and I'll leave the best judgment to you as professionals. So what makes Alpha Science different and innovative from all of what we've seen this morning? It's of course aligned to the NGSS and includes interactives and visuals. There are also lots of videos that you can integrate within, and strategies to meet all types of learners. And I'll talk about that in a bit detail in the next one. So here, the idea is to make sure that the science program addresses all of the 3 dimensions. So you have the cross-cutting concepts, the disciplinary core ideas, and the practices. So each of these student handbooks that you saw, the books are on your table. I don't know if I lost my microphone, but probably you can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so the idea is the books are kind of specifically addressing each of these elements within the NGSS. Okay, so here we go. We talked about this in the morning. Teaching science as if everything that has to be found out has already been discovered versus teaching science to say it is an evolutionary process. You still have to engage as engineers in that thinking process for improvement, innovation, implementing. So what these resources give us is to entice students, like the simple activities that you did, right from flying the airplane to building the tower. It kind of grasps onto the curiosity of the kids. Right? And they walk out of the classroom saying, how could I build my tower better tomorrow? And perhaps you have Tommy and Sammy still at home working their own model of building their towers, right? So keeping them engaged in that learning, which is very, very critical. So like I said, the books themselves are divided specifically into the 4 strands, and I think a lot of help is with the earth and space science, because often earth and space science is taught as a geography subject, but NGSS requires that to be integrated within the science teaching. So the resources are specifically divided into engineering, design, technology, life science, earth and space, and physical science. So within that, you have specific teacher-student resources, online resources, hands-on kits for students as well, so that we don't have to go through creating all of this. We can then sift through that and say, okay, what best applies to what I'm already doing in my classroom. Okay, so it gives you the breadth and the depth of it. So what is new? We talked about it a number of times. It came from you rather than from me in terms of how it needs to be real world connected and how practice needs to come about with the theory. And that's exactly what these books help us to do, help us to make those connections. Somebody already won a prize for that to say, yes, NGSS is not a curriculum. It's not going to tell you what to teach on Tuesday morning, 27th of July. No, it's those performance indicators. There was a very good question that came about. So how do I plan about my curriculum development? If you are a curriculum specialist in your school, you might want to look up Wiggins and McTighe's backward by design model. It's simply saying start with the end in mind. So if by the end of 2nd grade, if these are the standards my students have to demonstrate, what do I do in the month before, the month before, the month before, and then finally come to the day 1 of the year. It's called backward by design, work with the end in mind, and then you kind of break it down from there. Okay, and what these resources do is someone who has spent the time and energy and the thought process in working that backward design model. So they've taken the standards and they've said what are the disciplinary core ideas, the engineering practices, and all of that. So, and then like I said, what I really thought, like I see hundreds of resources, right? NGSS and all of it. What I really thought these one caught my attention is because there is that scaffolding. Full practice, guided practice, and directed practice. So it actually divides those student learning engagements into 3 steps. Here are some where students have to do by themselves. Here are some the teachers can guide, and here are some it's absolutely directed practice. Okay, you can have a look at what's around your table. And here we go, grade 1, grade through grade 3, the complete progression. Until which grades do we have though? Grade 12, grade 5 at the moment. Okay, it's right up to grade 5, and possibly they will build as we go on. So here we go. Any questions so far before I keep skimming through the slides? Any questions so far? Feel free to browse through the books. So if you have any questions, you can ask them before you leave. Somebody talked about how you can do these activities, extension activities outside of school. You don't necessarily have to have everybody in the classroom. Here we go. They have some interesting things for home activities for students who want to take it outside the classroom. And here are some more examples of engineering and technology specifically, bringing the two together. College and career readiness. The core standards are all about getting our students ready for college and career career paths that they may choose. As you saw in most of the activities that you did, communication, collaboration, teamwork, all of these were critical to all of the activities that you did, right? And those are the non-negotiables, 21st century non-negotiables, right? So these activities kind of help you to bring all of those together for you. Here we go, some more example of integrating science and math. So most of you do science and math in your school. It always comes together as a package. Your job descriptions if you're a curriculum coordinator. So how to bring in the Common Core math standards with the NGSS and the Common Core. And this was also something I thought was very powerful. It kind of gives you the step-by-step process. There is some sort of a lesson review at the beginning of every lesson, and the student also get a kind of an exit card when they finish that entire process. So it takes the student through the process. So you begin at this point, so you're kind of having a record as to where every student is. So when they do the practice, we're kind of having the 3-step model, directed practice, guided, and full practice. When they solve the problems, most of them are arts integrated as well, like the activity that you just did, bringing in the STEAM within the science. And then the assessment piece. We talked about this more than once, and I know you need a complete day just to focus on assessment, and it's great feedback. We'll hopefully look at that and say how we can build that into our next plan that we have. But what it does do is your student practice book gives you some assessing prior knowledge activities, some formative assessment on the way, and then finally the summative assessment as well with the chapter review. So that is specifically embedded within each and every of those course books. So it gives you that consistency within your assessment book. There we go, teacher resources. And the other thing that stood out for me, again, I'm just saying what stood out for me as educators. You will be able to figure out what's your best part within every of those resources. But what stood out for me is the fact that they cater specifically to the Middle Eastern audience. We are teaching to the standards of a country for which our kids are not native speakers, right? But the Middle Eastern person, at the same time, we don't want to say, oh, you are American curriculum in Dubai, so you will not rise to the standard of somebody in New York. That's not what we're trying to say, right? So we have a specific need. So the fact that the designers have looked into that aspect and said, yes, we have to meet to a particular rigorous standard and benchmark, but within our student clientele, that makes all the difference, you know. So differentiation is huge, because not all students in our classes read that fluently, as we saw in those videos. They're not fluent speakers. So how can we actually give students the opportunity? So there is specific things looked into upon multiple intelligence. Students get exit cards. Exit card in the sense, if you already got it, we don't want to give you more of the same. You're ready, Johnny has demonstrated understanding, you can move to the next activity, right? Whereas if you're still in the first activity, you can still use some more scaffolded instruction from the teacher. Other resources, there are online resources, interactive games. And these are the 4 components: the student book, the practice book, teacher's edition, and assessment book, along with multiple intelligence activity kit. So bringing in your differentiation aspect. So with the differentiation is built in differentiation exit card, so you may be at different levels, but and this is powerful in the sense of the student knowing, when am I ready to move on? You know, it's not always the teacher saying, hey, Johnny, you're ready. You know, Johnny can assess himself and say, no, I can get this, so now I'm ready to move on. So building in the self-assessment. There are some lesson plan templates within that. Interactive games, it's the era of gaming. So if we can't get our kids to learn through gaming, we still haven't met their needs. Graphic organizers. My brain works in a very structured way. Right? If I look at my table at home, my husband's like, I freak out when I see this column. Everything for me, that's just the way my brain functions, right? So if you are a structured graphic organizer person, I think this is very powerful. And I think it's essential when you engage in curriculum development, simply because when you leave, you know, everybody wants to move on in this part of you need to leave behind something I can make sense of. I don't want curriculum to be an abstract thing that someone has to figure out every single time they look at the document. So having some non-negotiables within your graphic organizer to say, here are the things that will be in my lesson plan, for example, and then giving them that leverage for some flexibility. So that's the last slide. And here we are. I hope we have sufficient time for questions and some feedback, which we do. Any questions before we get to feedback? Any resource-specific questions? Thank you so very much.
First of all, let me give out the prizes for the winner. And no one is actually going to lose with us today because whenever you're taking your certificates, we're going to give you something to remember us with.
Do we have to give out the certificates? Yeah, there we go.
So,
Shall I call out the name? Should I call out? Okay.
I just want to tell, if you're done with your evaluation form, just leave it on the table and we can collect them later. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. Did you want the alpha one out? What did you want out? Close it? Yeah, close it. Yeah, you can just turn it off there. Or for the photograph, yeah, you can do that. There we go. Okay, so pardon me if the names aren't pronounced correctly, but here's your chance to tell me how I can pronounce it correctly. So Naval Hayek.
Yes.
There we go.
Actually, just to let you know, the certificates are put in the order of who registered first. So you can know that Ms. Nawal was the first one to register for this event.
Rima Baba.
Rima.
Come on, you can clap better than that. Raid Abdullah. Esra Rashad. Almas Fatima.
Thank you. Pleasure. Much.
Lara Showman.
Lara. Thank you, Lara. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your participation. Thank you so much.
Tariq Adam. Tariq. Nicole.
Thank you very much.
Arij Al-Sayari. Is that correct? Lancia Marwan. Next time your design will be taken. Rasha Al-Darbi. Rasha.
Thank you, Sasha.
Dina Abu Mattar.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you very much.
Gada Al-Aridi.
Ms. Rada. Thank you very much, Ms. Rada.
Asma Hamdan. Anila Majid. Shaista Faruqi. Tabassum Noor Muqdam.
Ms. Tabassum.
Reem Nasser.
Thank you, Ms. Rain. Thank you.
Can I take a photo?
Absolutely.
Wissam Saleh Ibrahim.
Wissam, Mr. Wissam,
Wissam.
or Miss Wissam. Right.
Is that how I pronounce your name?
Wissam. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Tracy Metzler. Tracy or Tracy? Tracy, right?
Well, thank you very much. Thanks.
Sarah Asba.
Sarah, Miss Sarah.
There she is.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yusuf Siman. Yusuf.
Yusuf.
Thank you.
Karma. Help me with the second name.
Well,
Okay.
thank you, Scott. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Abir Abdul Wahab.